This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Huge crowds of our people participated in the funeral procession of the martyrs of the Israeli massacre that was committed this morning in Gaza City. They chanted phrases condemning the Israeli crimes and demanded the international community, the Quartet Committee, the UN, and international human rights organizations to stop the Israeli military escalation against our people.
When the martyrs were alive, they did not pose any risk to the Israeli occupation, but that did not stop the Israelis from shooting at them even when they were dead because of their hatred towards the Palestinians. As if the Palestinians must be killed 100 times before the Israeli occupation is satisfied and before the Arab and international community start paying attention. While the Palestinians were burying their martyrs who were killed in a cowardly Israeli raids, Israeli occupation soldiers opened fire on the funeral procession, injuring a number of people.
We received a call that a very large number of people were participating in the funeral procession of several martyrs near the Eastern Cemetery, and that the occupation forces opened fire randomly at them, injuring 3 children.
In less than half an hour, 11 citizens were martyred in Gaza in 3 consecutive air raids that targeted 2 cars and a civilian gathering. The child, Ahmed Maghribi, was with his father, brother and cousin during one raid, and he lost them all.
First, they hit the door. Then, as I was about to leave, I saw a young boy. I didn't know how old he was. He was the son of my aunt. His face was full of blood. Even when my aunt came, blood was dripping from her mouth. Also, both my father and brother were hit, and they died. 3 of them are dead.
The injured in these raids demanded the Palestinian factions to unite so they can face this unjust aggression.
I pleaded with the national Palestinian factions to calm down and unite and stop fighting each other. Can't they see what the Jews are doing to us? Isn't that enough? We're saying enough is enough. We must unite the Palestinian factions. You are seeing how the Jews are hitting us. This is not right.
مجزرة جديدة تأتي في إطار سلسلة الاعتداءات التي يرتكبها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي ضد الفلسطينيين.
This new massacre comes within a series of attacks committed by the Israeli occupation against unarmed Palestinians. The question is, until when will the Palestinians continue to fight each other, and until when will the Palestinian blood continue to be shed by both the Israeli occupation and by the Palestinians themselves?
أكرم أبو الهنود، تلفزيون فلسطين.
Mr. Yasser Bedrabu, a member of the Legislative Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, has announced today that several Palestinian officials called for the formation of a national unity government headed by an independent group in order to overcome the current impasse. The new government will only handle internal Palestinian issues. According to the proposal, Palestinian foreign and political affairs should be handled by the PLO and the Palestinian Presidential Office. This will be done in conjunction with members of Hamas and Islamic Jihad movements, which will be included in various PLO institutions.
Ramallah had its share of factional violence and infighting, thus spreading from the Gaza Strip. Dozens of armed men in Ramallah burned down several offices in the headquarters of the Palestinian National Council and the Hamas-led government. Violence also erupted in other West Bank cities and towns such as Jenin and Salfit, where armed men attacked several legislative and Hamas offices. Meanwhile, Palestinians expressed fear and concern over the spread of factional strife in the Palestinian territories. All Palestinian political factions and groups strongly condemn these episodes of factional violence between Fatah and Hamas, which have spread in recent days from Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip, to the West Bank.
Any more attacks on public or government property will be dealt with swiftly and firmly. This is public property, and it belongs to all Palestinian people, not to certain factions or groups.
This attack was directed at the symbol of our nation, and it is not acceptable. The Palestinian people have sacrificed thousands of lives in order to build a sovereign state, and now the symbols of our nation are being destroyed. This is not acceptable.
Despite the fact that all Palestinian factions and groups unanimously condemn these attacks on public property, Palestinian officials blamed one another for the violence. Such accusations and exchange of responsibility may lead to further animosity among Palestinian factions.
Believe me, our problem is that some Palestinians are doing what Israel wants them to do. I say this frankly. They are fueling these incidents in order to achieve certain agendas, which are aimed at sabotaging the Hamas-led government.
Unfortunately, we are amidst a state of factional strife, infighting, and power struggles. The Palestinian Authority must step down if it is deemed incompetent to protect the Palestinian people, especially in light of ongoing Israeli campaigns against the Palestinian people.
The Palestinian president, Mahmud Abbas, has put all law enforcement agencies on high alert in light of this security deterioration in the Palestinian territories in order to put an end to attacks on public property and armed showdown in the streets, especially in the aftermath of the kidnapping incident that targeted a Hamas cabinet member, Mr. Khalil al-Rabi, in Ramallah, and the phone threats received by the Minister of Tourism, Judy Mirkas. Armed men also opened fire on Mr. Mirkas's house in Bethlehem, forcing him to resign from the Hamas-led government. The struggle for power between Hamas and Fatah, which in turn ignited the Palestinian spectrum, gave Israel an opportunity to continue its campaign of killings and bloodshed against the Palestinian people, and it left the door open for Tel Aviv to go on with its unilateral plan with the greatest of ease.
The Hayat Daily reported security sources saying that the second stage of the investigation with witness Mahmud Rafe was aimed at revealing whether there was a link between the security operations Lebanon has witnessed in the last year and members of the Israeli-Lebanese network allegedly involved in the Majzoub brothers' killing. Sources say that Rafe has been involved with the Mossad since the year 1994. And the connection with him has probably been made through the agent Alamuddin Badawi, who was a security official with the southern Lebanese army. The same sources say that after the liberation of the south, Rafe was assigned several operations, and the bomb installations used to take place via pathways through Shib'a and Odaysa, passing by Kfarkila and Wazani. The Fatah secretary in Lebanon, Sultan Abu al-Ainain, left Beirut for the first time in 21 years and headed to Amman, where he will be meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Both leaders will tackle the Palestinian file in the light of the latest developments in Lebanon and the occupied territories. A failed Israeli airstrike against a car carrying militants along a main road in Gaza City today killed 9 Palestinians, including 2 school children. The Israeli military said the militants were on a mission to launch rockets at southern Israel. Meanwhile, several thousand Hamas supporters took to the streets of Gaza yesterday, angry at the recent outbreak of violence in Ramallah and between Hamas and Fatah factions. Yumna Tayyara has the latest developments.
Calm returned to the streets of the West Bank and Gaza this morning after unprecedented factional violence which saw government buildings torched, an MP kidnapped and deadly clashes. Palestinian President Mahmud Abbas and Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh to hold talks in a bid to ease tensions between their respective Fatah and Hamas factions, with members of the security services placed on maximum alert. Abbas issued the edict late yesterday for a state of alert in a bid to restore order after Fatah hardliners in the West Bank town of Ramallah had set fire both to the Hamas government's cabinet offices and the parliament. Gunmen from the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, supported at times by members of the security services, even initially prevented the fire brigade from reaching the cabinet offices, although the blaze was eventually brought under control. Gunmen and security officers smashed windows, destroyed computers, and tore up files. Apart from the maximum state of alert for the official security forces, Abbas ordered all armed groups off the streets of Gaza. During the rampage in Ramallah, Hamas MP Khalil Rabai was also briefly kidnapped by masked men. To cap the sense of chaos, one of the few independent members of the Palestinian cabinet, Tourism Minister Juda Murkus, resigned in protest at the worsening security situation. The Fatah loyalists' anger had been sparked by earlier violence in the southern Gaza Strip town of Rafah, where Hamas militiamen tried to storm a compound housing the local headquarters of the Preventive Security Service. 2 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded in Monday's factional violence in Rafah, which at one stage saw Hamas fire rocket-propelled grenades into the Preventive Security headquarters. Adding yet more fuel to the fire, most of the security services have gone unpaid for the past 3 months as a result of Israeli and international sanctions imposed against the Palestinian Authority since Hamas came to power.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called for strategic cooperation with Saudi Arabia, including help in resolving Sunni-Shiite tensions in Iraq. In a meeting with visiting Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud al-Faisal yesterday, Khamenei also called for Islamic nations to support the Hamas-led Palestinian government. Sunni-ruled Saudi Arabia has accused Shiite Iran of meddling in the affairs of its violence-ravaged neighbor, but Tehran has denied the charge. A spat over the issue prompted Iran's Foreign Minister Manouchehr Muttaqi to put off a visit to the kingdom 9 months ago. Meanwhile, the United States was fighting to prevent non-aligned states backing Iran's right to uranium enrichment at a meeting of the UN Nuclear Agency. Non-aligned countries plan to issue a statement in support of Tehran at the International Atomic Energy Agency meeting, which opened yesterday.
The Iraqi Ministry of Defense announced that more than 40,000 Iraqi and American soldiers will carry out a security campaign in Baghdad starting tomorrow. More than 30 Iraqis were killed in separate attacks, including 5 car bombs in Kirkuk. Security and Progress is a new security plan by the Iraqi security and American forces that will begin tomorrow in the city of Baghdad. The new operation, which has no timeline, aims to impose order in tense areas by deploying more than 40,000 security men, including Iraqi security forces and the multinational forces. In addition to the plan, there will be an increase in curfews, along with a ban on cars driving on the road.
This security plan has been drawn up with the participation of Ministries of Interior and Defense. All negative aspects of previous plans that were put in place in Baghdad have been removed. In addition, there will be a reinforcement of patrols, checkpoints, and Iraqi forces in these areas in Baghdad.
Despite these preparations, the violence continues throughout Iraq. 18 people killed and 15 others were injured by a booby-trapped car being driven by 2 suicide bombers in the popular Tessin market in the center of Kirkuk. The Iraqi police killed a 3rd suicide bomber who attempted to detonate a booby-trapped car in a crowd of police officers.
A car bomb went off near the residential area near a police patrol, killing one of the passengers and lightly wounding another person. Thank God.
The Iraqi security forces found 14 unidentified bodies that were killed by gunshots after they had been tortured. In Baghdad and in the north, 4 civilians were killed and 7 others were injured by an explosive device that targeted a police patrol in a market in the center of Samarra. In Baghdad, a police officer was killed and 5 others were injured, including 4 policemen and a detainee, when an explosive device detonated. A professor in the engineering school in Baghdad University was killed in an armed attack in the Mansoura area. In Karbala, 2 police officers were killed, including a general, and another was injured in the Asra neighborhood. 5 people were killed, including an officer and a child in Bakuba.
A little after 8 o'clock, after the sunset prayers, the explosion went off, killing about 12 people, including 4 children and 2 women.
In the Dora neighborhood, 13 people were injured by a mortar shell that landed on a number of homes and stores in a popular market in the area of Abu Shir, south of the capital of Baghdad.
U.S. President George W. Bush made a surprise visit to Iraq today, his second since the U.S.-led invasion in 2003, and met new Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. The White House said Bush would be on the ground for more than 5 hours and would also meet the U.S. troops. The visit, his first since November 2003, when he went to see the U.S. troops for Thanksgiving, comes 6 days after a U.S. airstrike killed Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. From Baghdad International Airport, Bush boarded a Black Hawk helicopter for an 8-minute ride in searing heat into the heavily fortified Green Zone for meetings with the Iraqi officials at the U.S. Embassy. Earlier, President George W. Bush acknowledged that Iraq's insurgency remains a serious challenge.
We've just had the Iraq's neighbors ought to do more to help them. And we're constantly working with our friends in the neighborhood to encourage them to support this new democracy. And I recognize that there's some concerns about a Shia prime minister and from different countries where there's Sunni representation, Sunni leadership. But our message is that Iraq will show that it's possible for people of all faiths to live together. After all, they've got the most modern.
More than 30 people were killed today in sporadic attacks in Iraq. Some of the victims were killed by the American military forces, and others were killed in bombing attacks by armed groups. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda organization has appointed Abu Hamza al-Muhajir as its new leader. Mr. Muhajir will replace his predecessor, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who was killed by the American military forces last Wednesday. In a meeting with his senior staff, the American President George Bush announced that the new Al-Qaeda leader will be added to the world's most wanted list.
According to Iraqi government and American officials, a new stage began in Iraq in the aftermath of Zarqawi's death. Coalition forces were instructed to crack down swiftly on armed groups suspected of affiliating with Al-Qaeda, especially in Sunni areas west of Iraq. However, civilian Iraqis are the ones paying the price. In Baquba, an American airstrike hit an inhabited house near the one where Zarqawi was killed last Wednesday, killing 7 Iraqis and spreading fear among local residents. The American army claimed that their forces came under fire and they acted in self-defense. Among the dead were 2 young children.
غير أنه تكشف أن بين القتلى طفلين لا علاقة لهما بالسلاح.
God is great. Why did they kill my family? My son and grandson were killed. I do not have anybody else left. They are all gone. Why? God is great.
مشهد يريد الرئيس الأمريكي جورج بوش التسلل عبر مأساويته بتحقيق نجاحات عسكرية.
The American President George W. Bush wants to achieve military victory in Iraq and promote the government of Nour al-Maliki, capitalizing on the death of Zarqawi.
مجلس حرب بشأن التحرك القادم في العراق يبدأ بتشاور طوال نهار الاثنين مع كبار مساعديه في مقر إقامته الصيفي في كامب ديفيد، ويستمر في اليوم الموالي.
Mr. Bush will meet this week with his advisors in Camp David to plan the way ahead in Iraq. Then he will hold talks via a closed-circuit video conference with the Iraqi Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki and his cabinet. The objective of this meeting is to find ways to curb the violence in Iraq and help the government of Noor al-Maliki to maintain security there. In the aftermath of Zarqawi's death, Washington and Baghdad are applying the policy of the stick and the carrot in dealing with the armed groups. It has been reported that the government of Noor al-Maliki has invited certain armed leaders to join a national reconciliation conference set for September 2006. However, prior to any dialogues, Iraqi political leaders must unanimously agree on a definition of the word resistance. In the aftermath of its leader's death, Al-Qaeda announced that it will work in conjunction with Sunni and other armed groups affiliating with the former regime of Saddam Hussein. It vowed that it will launch large-scale armed attacks in Iraq, which may trigger more violence.
تزلزل العدو بعد مقتل زعيمه الزرقاوي بالتنسيق مع فصائل أخرى يجعل جماعات.
A car bomb targeting a passenger vehicle carrying employees working for the Ministry of Industry exploded, killing 6 Iraqis. This explosion took place just a few hours after Al-Qaeda's vow for revenge.
من بين عمال كانوا يستقلون حافلة إلى وزارة الصناعة بعد ساعات فقط من نشر تنظيم القاعدة لبيان الوعيد.
What did we do wrong to deserve this? We came here to work. The victims worked as welders for the Ministry of Industry. They targeted innocent people. There were no Americans or National Guards employed here. I swear to God, they were all welders.
Moreover, a mortar attack hit the area of Dura in Baghdad, killing 4 Iraqis. In addition, a bomb was detonated in the area of Shatra, killing at least 10 Iraqis. The car bombs exploded in the city of Sadr and the area of Mansour, killing 7 Iraqis. More Iraqis were also killed in sporadic attacks in the town of Biji, Tikrit, and Kirkuk.
Iraqi detainees are being held for long periods of time without due process or court order. The issue is causing a tremendous amount of fear and concern among detainees' families. Al-Sharqiya correspondent in Samara reported on the reactions from detainees' families and their loved ones.
Detainees' mothers are very sad, and their children are growing up without fathers. The fathers have been locked up behind bars in Iraqi detention centers for a long period of time without due process. This is the status of Iraqi detainees in Samara. They are waiting impatiently to be released so they can see their children. If not released, they should at least be given a fair trial.
In a unanimous decision, the presidential office and the Iraqi government issued an order to release all detainees who have not been indicted. This includes all innocent detainees in Iraqi and coalition forces prisons. This decision was reached in conjunction with all political blocs prior to the formation of the new government.
Meeting with their loved ones is one of the biggest problems facing the detainees because they have to wait for long periods of time before seeing them. In addition, some are housed in places that are far away from major cities, such as the case of Boka Detention Center in the town of Qasr.
He has been detained for 1 year and 3 months. His father and I saw him only once. His brother saw him twice. He was taken into custody by the Iraqi Interior Ministry forces. Then he was transferred to Division 5. It's been 6 months since we saw him last. He was sent back to the Interior Ministry prison. We do not know what he is being charged with. They searched our house completely, and they did not find any weapons or guns or even bullets.
He has been detained for nearly 2.5 years.
Who took him?
The Americans.
Why did they arrest him?
For no reason. They stormed into the house and arrested him.
Where is he now?
He is now in Abu Ghraib prison.
Detainees' families are also facing financial problems. They were left without means of support, especially considering the fact that in most cases, the heads of the household are the ones being targeted. Some Iraqis called on the appropriate authorities to release the detainees.
وأناشيد الضمير الحي.
I call on those kind hearts to help secure the freedom of my children. I have not seen my son for 2 years and 7 months. Why is this oppression happening? I call on all Iraqis to release my son, who also has a 4-year-old son. I am very sick and I cannot go to see him because the jail is very far away from here. I plead to the concerned authority and the new government to free my son from jail. As God is my witness, I would like to ask the new government, don't they have children? Please release my children.
I urge the Quartet Committee that is in charge of the detainees' files to review the prisoners' cases on first-come, first-served basis. They should first release those detainees who have been held for years in jails. Then, they should release those detainees who have been in jails for a period ranging between 6 months and a year. My son has been in jail for more than 2 years and 7 months, and they have not even reviewed his file yet.
2.5 years ago, the Americans told us that our son would return home tomorrow, God willing. It has been 2.5 years and we have not heard from him.
The problem of Iraqi detainees is a hot topic, and it is an important case. This issue must be put in the bargaining table of the new government, which is faced with several outstanding hot issues and files.
The American President George W. Bush made a surprise visit to Baghdad on Tuesday and met with Iraqi senior officials. In a press conference at the close of his meeting with Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, Bush repeated his groundless claims against Iran, saying Tehran is interfering in Iraq's internal affairs. Bush called Iraq an insecure country and said U.S. soldiers stay there until conditions improve. The Iraqi Prime Minister, for his part, said his cabinet is determined to fight against terrorism so that U.S. and other forces could withdraw. Bush's unexpected visit to Iraq came amid the ongoing talks that began Monday at Camp David on the U.S.-led war effort in Iraq to, as Bush has announced, map ways to help the new government there.
Mounting pressure from the American and international public opinion calling for withdrawal of the occupation forces from Iraq has made the White House officials work out a mechanism to blunt the existing criticism. This has been the main reason behind the two-day meeting in Camp David attended by President George W. Bush and his administration, as well as his top aides and senior army commanders. The long-term U.S. presence in Iraq triggers instability there, either through direct intriguing people or via pushing forward puppet elements like al-Zarqawi, all to divert the public opinion from the presence of U.S. troops in Iraq on one hand and the killing of Shiite Muslims in that country on the other. Although in a press conference in the opening day of the meeting, the U.S. president apparently voiced support for the Iraqi government, he described Iraq as a safe haven for terrorists, trying to depict the U.S. as the savior of Iraq and the whole world. However, it is an established fact that the presence of the occupation forces in Iraq is a main reason which has given rise to persistent insecurity, daily massacre of civilians, and even torture in that war-torn country, and that the killing of civilians in Al-Haditha, Isaghi, and Al-Imara gives evidence to this speculation. This comes while Washington says the Camp David meeting aims to revise U.S. policies in Iraq. However, it should be noted that the existing circumstances and the worldwide call for an end to the occupation of Iraq leave no option for the White House but to fundamentally think twice over its approaches on Iraq.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.